And yes, we were successful in getting Congressman Ron Paul on the line. And good morning, Congressman.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Great to have you back. Since we talked last, you proposed $1 trillion in specific cuts, a very bold plan that has been largely ignored, and its boldness is in eliminating 5 cabinet posts, cutting your own pay, etc. Do you want to expand on that for us?
Well, I see our problems coming from overspending and debt. The world's facing a debt crisis, and it's being manifested right now in Europe, particularly with Greece. But financially, we're not any better off. There's a little more trust in what we do because we're a wealthy country, and we've been able to issue dollars that everybody takes, and we have a powerful military. But we face the same consequence. So we got there by overspending and running up too much debt. We destroyed our productivity. So we're locked in on this course, and the only way you can reverse this is to start living within your own means. An individual would have to do that. A country has to as well. So rather than waiting for the crisis to hit where nothing works and you have runaway inflation and total confidence lost in the dollar, working our way out of it is much better option than waiting for that crisis to hit.
What do you say to people who say, if we do what Ron Paul says and we cut $1 trillion, or we eliminate the education department, the energy department, and cut back on these other departments, we're going to put a lot of people out of work. And if we do that, that increases unemployment, that furthers our dip into the recession. What is your response to that?
Well, if you do everything right, there'll be jobs, but you wouldn't be... When you take money from the taxpayer and you pay somebody about twice as much as the average person makes in the private market, government officials on the average make $80,000, and private individuals, their average is less than $50,000. So you would be more productive by doing this. But if you had, if you restore a free market and sound money and balanced budgets and low taxes, you don't have to worry about that. When World War II ended, actually 10 million people came back and they were discharged, and the budget was slashed, more than 50%, and taxes went down, and we finally got over the Depression. So it isn't so much that a couple hundred thousand people might be laid off. Matter of fact, my program doesn't lay them off immediately. Most of it is through attrition. But yes, if we did what we're supposed to do, there would be a lot of people leave the government, and they would go and do productive work, and they might make less money. But the people who are paying for this, it would be a blessing to them. It would be no sacrifice on their part to have a good job and get rid of all the taxes that they're paying.
What is the most frustrating part of your campaign for the presidency?
Well, I think it's overcoming probably 50 years of bad education on economics, where they're taught that government is a necessity, that the Federal Reserve is needed to print money and deficits don't matter. Conservatives and liberals have endorsed that for years. Republicans haven't done a very good job on deficits. I think it's overcoming these ideas, which are called Keynesian economics rather than free market economics. And yet the most encouraging thing is that there's more people than I ever dreamed would be looking at the free market now, especially among the college people. They're very interested in what I'm talking about, and they're tired of these wars, and they're tired of the spending, they're tired of the debt. And as a matter of fact, part of my program is letting anybody under 25 out of Social Security if they want, as a transition away from dependency on the government.
An opt-out for Social Security for the young.
Right.
You also proposed, before any of the rest of them started, with federal tax policy, reducing the top corporate rate to 15%,
right,
eliminating capital gains, dividend taxes, allowing repatriation of overseas capital without tax penalties. That would bring a lot of businesses and a lot of jobs back home, wouldn't it?
This is what you have to do, because they don't go away because they don't like America. They leave us because they can't compete anymore. So they go to different countries, and then if they do make some money and decide to come back and invest here, then we give them a strong penalty. So you want to be friendly toward capital. a weak currency is also unfriendly toward capital, and so people leave. And one of the problems we've had, of course, is we've issued the reserve currency, the dollar. Everybody wants dollars. That means it's easier for us to export dollars and buy goods rather than being productive. So all these tax changes and monetary changes are necessary if we want to get growth and jobs again.
Do you think that one of the benefits of Barack Obama's presidency to this country is that he has taken what has been actually a bipartisan problem of spending too much and taxing too much and too much interference of the government in people's lives? Has he taken it to such an extreme that now more Americans are aware of the government problem?
I think there's a lot of truth to that, but it also builds the antagonism. It becomes class warfare and generational warfare by them demagoguing the issue. But and it's a real contest between those who are buying into the fact that government isn't doing enough and you need to raise the taxes on the rich and that'll solve the problems, versus those who are now discovering, look at what he's done. We better wake up. So we don't know the results of this, and it's up for grabs. There are days when I'm very encouraged, especially when I talk to young people willing to look at different ideas. But it's this next election will be pretty important in deciding. This last election was a significant change where people acted outside of the two-party system and had the Tea Party movement. But sometimes when you have these grassroots movement, the goals become distorted. Everybody joins in, and some people, want more government, and then it gets very confusing. So I think Obama has helped precipitate this debate. I think it's an intellectual argument now and a pursuit to find out just whose ideas are going to win out.
You have had very successful fundraising lately. Haven't you raised over $3 million, and from small donors from all states, right?
Yeah, and that was just, in one, it was 2.7 in one fundraiser that occurred with the last debate. So, yes, the fundraising is very beneficial. That fundraiser, I think we had 44,000 donors. So, there had to be a lot of small donors in there. And our top three categories of individuals who sent money in, first it was the Air Force, and then it was the Army, and then it was the Navy. So I get strong support for the military. Percentage-wise, they're the largest number of people employed in those divisions.
And how do you figure that?
Well, I think they're tired of being sent overseas constantly and fighting a war that they don't see any end in sight, and they'd like all of us to be more cautious in sending them to war.
Yeah.
Well, and there are a tremendous number of troops in places all over the world where it may be bewildering why we are still there, why we still have troops.
I mean, they went to Korea when I was in high school. I think it's time to come home, especially since we're broke. And then, immediately bringing them home without discharging them, they would be spending all those salaries here, and that can't be harmful. That's not the total solution, but that couldn't be harmful if they were spending all that money here rather than in Germany and Japan and South Korea. And now it looks like we'll be putting people in more countries in the Middle East as well as in Africa.
Why are some people suggesting that Herman Cain is a plant in the race?
A plant?
Yeah.
Is that a plant like one that blooms?
I don't think so.
No, I hadn't heard that one, so I don't have a good opinion about that.
Well, okay, let me ask you.
Ideologically, he supports bigger government than I do because he wants to add a tax. He wants a sales tax and an income tax. And that, to me, is very dangerous.
About the media, have they confused a lot of Americans about the Tea Party movement and Occupy Wall Street?
I think they've contributed a whole lot, but there is a little bit of confusion because the very first Tea Party movement was with our campaign 4 years ago, and then that sort of morphed into something broader. Anybody who was unhappy with the government and thought the government should be restrained, but for different reasons, and they had different opinions about the Federal Reserve and the foreign policy. But now it has even changed more, where some people are saying that the solution is only raise taxes on the rich. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's a good idea if they got rich because they were living off the taxpayer and living off the government and the Federal Reserve. But if somebody gets rich because they produce a good product, we shouldn't put them all together. So I think there is a mixed bag there, but it looks like there are some, I think, just as the Republicans jumped on the Tea Party movement, the Democrats are jumping on, and they're claiming that the Occupy group on Wall Street are supporting their views, and the media sort of feeds on it.
Your foreign policy views are a stumper to a lot of voters. They will love many things about your fiscal reality, and yet the foreign policy, the fact that you think Iran is not a threat and we should not worry about their nuclear capabilities, etc.
Well, I don't know whether it would be quite don't worry about it, but I think over-worrying and being willing to go to war for no good reason and not putting it in perspective, that worries me, because right now the United Nations nor our CIA say they're on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon. If they had a nuclear weapon, I don't believe that they're going to launch it. I mean, their whole country would be eliminated within hours, both the United States and Israel. They're not going to do that. But I was in the military in the 60s, and I was drafted during the Cuban crisis. I mean, we were dealing with some serious problems, tens of thousands of nuclear weapons and missiles in Cuba. And we just stood firm, and finally the Soviet system collapsed for economic reasons, and we ended up trading with China. So I think our greatest threat is our economic problems that are compounded by willing to go to war constantly. This to me, we're in too many wars. We're bankrupting ourselves, and we're going to face the fate of what happened to the Soviets. And this is what happens so often throughout history, is once you spend way beyond your means, empires collapse because of the financial reasons.
I'm curious about the Ron Paul position on a fence, protecting our borders. You have suggested that if we build a fence on our border, that it may keep some illegals from coming to this country, but eventually it could be used to keep Americans from leaving.
Well, at least symbolically, in many ways, that has happened. You know, when they proposed the real ID card, and any ID card is designed, you know, to check on illegals. But you can't do that without giving everybody an ID card. So there's more restraints on us. Already we see more restraints of going and coming across our borders because we have to have our passports now, even to go to Canada or Mexico, which is something pretty new. But if you and I talked a lot about the financial fence that we'll build eventually. But if somebody didn't do banking and happened to save up $10,000 in cash and he wants to go into Mexico, I mean, he can't do it. He'll be stopped, and he'll probably not be able to go in because he'd have to explain where he got every single dollar. So we already have a lot of restraints. But in a financial breakdown, there's more of a temptation to people pick up their cash and pick up their gold and go and take it elsewhere, and that's when the restraints come in. So I talk about a financial iron curtain more than I do that, you know, the barbed wire is going to keep us from leaving. Not quite like that.
One of the biggest inhibitors to business has been, to small business creation, has been the Obamacare benefit program that has now been scrapped, the CLASS program. Did you realize long before this that it was
sustainable
fiscally?
Well, I think most of us did, at least the ones of us who voted against it. But so much of what we do is unsustainable. You know, right now, Medicare and Medicaid are, essentially broke. So these programs aren't sustainable. I think even the prescription drug program. But Obamacare was the worst of the worst, and that is why, the very least, people ought to have the right to opt out, not only on Social Security. They ought to be able to opt out of all government medicine, be able to deduct it from their taxes.
Ron Paul, it's a delight to talk with you.
Again, we always enjoy it.
Appreciate it, and hope we'll talk again sometime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Congressman Ron Paul, presidential candidate Ron